So now we've seen how we can we've seen the basics of what of promises. How we can now there is a reason why in our last class, what did we talk about? We talked about async and await, right? And I said I just wanted to go into async and await. But then you will not understand async and await properly if you do not first have like a basic example or explanation of of what promises look like. Do you get? That is why I'm explaining promises now. I'm going to give you one more example on that promises and then immediately move into what async and await. Now, in this case, I want to create a promise that the only thing I am going to get is going to be what? Is going to be a success message. How exactly am I going to create something like that? Now, again, understand this question. I only want to create a promise that returns a success message. How will I create something like that? What will the promise take in? Exactly. Why will it not be using reject? Because it is not going to have a what? A failure. Everything is going to be success. That's why we're going to have a result. Do you get it? So easily, I'm going to come here, I'm going to say what? Function. Right? I'm going to create a function that waits for a particular time. And as it is waiting, it's telling you what? Wait as this page is loading. So after it tells you that thing, it waits for how many seconds? Like 5 seconds. Then it shows what? The loaded page. Do you understand? So I'm going to create a function called what? Wait. And wait is going to load in how many seconds? In milliseconds. Do you understand? Now I'm going to return a new promise. New promise. Right? Then I'm going to say what? I'm going to call resolve. And then we're going to set it to, we're going to create a set timeout. Right? Then we're going to have what? Resolve. And what exactly are we resolving? We're resolving the time in what? In milliseconds. Now, this is basically how we can create sorry. Now, what exactly have I done here? I created a function that waits for a particular message. First of all, just wait first. Let us load up. You understand? So, as we are waiting for it, there's something missing here. Come in, let me check the example I give here. I wrote down here. This is actually our wait. Async and await. This is actually async and await. You know what? We're going to use another example. So this will need async and await. Let me just give you a simple async and await example first. I'm trying to see what we can use as let us use this as our first async and await system. Async and await. You know what? Let us create another promise. Let's create another promise. Now, this particular promise, what exactly is it going to do for us? So now let us check a particular promise that gets the user. So what exactly are we going to do? If the user's name or if the user's value is 1, it's going to tell us that the user exists. But if the user's value is something else, what's going to tell us? User does not exist. You understand? So that's basically what we're going to do. So we're going to create a new promise. We're going to say what? Function. I also want to show us promise for the last time. Function. We're going to say what? Get user. Right? Then we're not going to have what? User. Now we're going to return a new promise. And in this case, the promise is going to have what? Resolve and what? Reject. Resolve for if the user returns a what? A user exists. Reject for if the user returns a what? User does not exist. So we can now have what? Return. And we can have new promise. Now in this case, we have what? A resolve. And we're also going to have a what? A reject. Then we're going to have our promise function. Now, in this place, I'm going to give this a parameter. So the mistake. I'm going to give it a parameter of ID, the user ID. So if the user ID is equal to 1, what is it going to give to us? Eh? Like if the user ID is what 1, what is going to do to you? So basically what you can have is what? You can have what? You can have a prompt. You cannot say ID is equals to what? Prompt. You understand? To get users prompt. So prompt what? Enter ID. Do you get ID? So you want to get a prompt. So as you can see, this is even the best way to use asynchronous function. Now you are waiting for user to input something. If the user now inputs 1, what do you want to have? Print out what user exists. But the user now includes what? Something else. What do you want to print out? It does not exist. Now we can use an if statement for that. I cannot say if ID equals 1, right? What do you want to have? You want to have what? You want to resolve. You want to resolve what? Resolve user exists. Why is it giving me error? ID is declared, but the value is never read. No, I'm going to remove this. I think it should be here. This is an error. This is definitely going to be an error. Well, okay. Sorry. All right, good. So now we have what? If ID equals 1, what do we want to resolve what? User exists. Now, we're not also going to have a else. The else is now going to be what? We're going to what? Reject. So else is now going to what? Reject. We must reject this particular promise and say what? User doesn't exist. Do you understand? Is it clear to everybody? Eh? Good. Now we've gotten our what? Our resolve and our reject. How exactly are we now going to what? Get this function? How are we going to get this function? How are we going to make this function work? Eh? What do you say? Okay, good. How are we going to use it? Then how are we going to use it? Eh? Just .10 like this. Exactly. Get user. Right? Dot what? 10. You understand? Dot 10. You don't necessarily need ID. You don't even need to put in. Okay, I think we need to pass the ID. Thank you. We need to pass the ID. Why are we passing the ID here? Bracket. Yeah? Is the ID bracket or the ID standing? No. Look at this. We said function get user is what? ID. ID is your parameter. It's a function's parameter. Now we now say that this same ID that is a parameter equals to what? Prompt enter ID. So it's going to give you a prompt in the what? In the browser. Now in this case, we're not going to have what get user dot then. But I'm thinking we should pass the ID here, but let's just hold on first. Now if we have what get user dot then, this dot then, what are we going to have here? Our response, right? And the response is going to what? Give us what? Console.log response. That's what the result, rather the success. Do you get it now? Now the next one is not going to be what? Another dot then, right? That's not going to give us our what? Our error. Sorry, dot catch rather. That's a mistake. Dot catch. We've already used dot then already. Dot catch. That's going to give us our error. Now in this place, what exactly are we going to have? We're not going to have what? Console dot what? Dot log error. Let me remove this. Now do you understand? So now if you go ahead and you check this out, let us refresh it. Now we refresh, wait for this. Now if I put 1 and I click enter, can you see that what is it? What is it show? User doesn't exist. that's funny. Because we said if it is equals to 1. You know, let me pass my ID here and let's see what we have now. Now we'll refresh it. Let's see. ID is not defined. Okay. Uh, let's check it. Let's press 1. That doesn't exist. Why is he rejecting it automatically? Well, I don't. Let me try and make it. Let me try and make it not too strict. So if I press 1, user exists. You understand? So user exists. So now let me refresh it again. Let me use 2 in this place. User does not exist. Do you understand it now? So that is basically what we just tried to create. Okay, A does not equal. Let me remove that other one that's here. I think it's interfering, if you notice. So it's interfering. So I'm going to remove this, and I'm going to have something much more simpler. Now let us try it again now. So if I press 10 and I click enter, what's showing me? User doesn't exist. Now if I press 1, now what is it going to show me? User exists. Can you see that our function and our promise is now working? You understand? This is basically how your promise you can easily use your promise. Now, what has just happened? First of all, you have this ID parameter, right? And then it takes in an ID prompt about enter ID. Now, if you press 1, what's it going to show you? User exists. But if you press what? Other numbers, what will you get? To reject it and tell you what? User doesn't exist. Do you understand it now? That is basically what this function is all about. I hope everybody understands promises now. Is it clear to us? Can I move on to async and await? All right. Now let us take in. Let me fetch from this API. Good. Let me try and look for. You know what? I'm going to do this same thing with your normal promises, and then we're not going to go ahead and do that same thing with async and await. So just a moment. Let me see if I can fetch something with just promises here. I'm trying to look for the API. Okay. Just a moment. So I think this is it. I'm not really sure. Yeah, I think this should be it. Good. Now let us fetch this. Let's fetch this. Now, let's say you want to talk about fetching certain data from online APIs, free APIs online. I'm going to go into API in details in our next class. Now, again, what are APIs? API stands for Application Programming Interface. Now, what do you use your APIs to do? Very easy. Use your API in what? Fetching data. In making sure that, okay, not really fetching data. What is it is what? It's just making your life easier. So, for instance, I've explained this before. That whenever you want to do something complex, you can easily use your API to what? To narrow it down and make it easier for you to integrate. Right? So, for instance, you want to build a weather application. Do you go all over the world and collect the weather details of everywhere? No. You can easily use an API that has already moved condition to know the weather around the world. Do you guys now? So easily use that API, integrate it into your app, and build a weather API. As you can see, your life is easier. All you just have to do is write your code. And you need to know how that API works. Do you get? That is very, very much important. Now, in this class, I'm just going to talk about one API. Now, this is just to fetch data. We're not going to do much. Just to fetch data and just print it out. Now, in our next class, probably on Wednesday, next week rather, we'll talk about building a weather application. Now, in building a weather application, I will show you how you can integrate API using docs. Now, in our next class on Wednesday, we'll talk about Firebase also, how you can integrate Firebase API into your application. But for now, let us talk about this fetching data from just a random API. Now, in this case, I'm going to say I am trying to call this async. Now, let's call this async and await function. Now, in this asynchronous function, I want to actually use something that doesn't really need async and await first. I think I have it. an API here. I'm not really sure. Okay, let me go up. I think it's in this. It's in promises. Good. It should be in promises. This should be. Now, let's say I want to fetch a particular. There's in JavaScript to use. There's a way you get. Now in JavaScript, right? When you talk about APIs, right? There's a word called fetch. It's just like your normal. I mean, your reports are fetching field before to fetch water. You understand? If you are fetching water, you're trying to fetch water from a source, right? It's the same thing in web application or even in software engineering. If you are trying to get data, what are you trying to do? You are trying to fetch data from that source. You understand? And that's where the keyword fetch comes from. Now, in modern software engineering, there are different ways you can get data. You can use Agios to get data. Agios is a different framework to getting data. But the inbuilt way you using getting data in almost all programming languages is fetch. Use fetch in fetching data from source. Now let's say you want to fetch data from this API. Again, the API is in what? In performing in writing what's the name? Solutions that easily makes your life easier. You understand? Now, how exactly can you now get data from that particular API? You fetch data from the API. Now, I'm going to use this fetch keyword, and I'm going to say fetch, right? And I'm going to fetch data from this particular API link here. That is an open source API that I can easily use in understanding what API is. Now, I'm going to fetch from this API. Now, after I have fetched, what exactly am I going to do next? I need to use my .then to get the response. Now, you see what .then does. I have fetched the API. You now want to do something. What do? Use .then, isn't it? If you come back to your promises, after you've written your function, what do you want to do? .then to get the response of what that particular .then is going to do, or that API is going to do. It's the same thing with your function. Now your API is like a function, but it was not you that wrote it. It's like an object that was written to perform something, but it was not you that wrote it. Do you get it now? It's the same thing right here. Now you've written your function and then you use your .then to tell the computer what you want after you gotten that particular response from the function. Or in this case, gotten that response from the API. Is it clear to you now? So I'm now going to .then to also get my response. So I'm going to say .then to get my response from that API. So I'm going to have response, right? Then I'm going to say response.json. Okay, now we're already getting into something much more complex. What does JSON mean? JSON means what? JavaScript object notation. That's what JSON means. In our next class, I'll explain what JSON means to us. But basically what JSON means is JavaScript object notation. Now, what JSON does is just to make sure that whatever API it is you are calling is readable. Now, if you are writing your normal JavaScript code right now, you write all of your objects, if you're writing in objects, you're writing in array, it's normal, you write it like that. But if you really want to understand what those API is all about, you need to pass it into a JSON format so that it is readable to you. Again, in our next class, I'll explain what JSON is. But for now, we're going to get the response and we're going to pass it into a JSON format. Do you understand? That's basically what your JSON is. Then after that, we're going to have another .then that gets the data, right? And the data, you're also going to get console.log. Then I have console.log. So let us get the value of the data in our what's the name? Console. I hope everybody is following me. Who's following? Who's not following? It's not supposed to be. Okay. But this is not even supposed to be an error. Okay, yeah. That's one issue. Yeah. So now we've actually gotten our dot then. If the data exists, we've gotten our dot then, right? Now let us go ahead and what get our error. So we can have what dot catch. And this dot catch, we're going to have what an error, right? And what's going to be the error? Or ERR, you understand? What's going to be the error? You can say console.log ERR or error, sorry, error. Now, this is how to fetch your data in what? With your normal promises. This is how you fetch data in JavaScript from an API. This is the basic way of fetching data. Now, you also have other things where you need to what? Put it to consideration. That's where we have what HTTP method. We'll talk about that in our next class on Wednesday. So now on Wednesday, we talk about JSON. We'll talk about HTTP methods, right? So you understand your get, post, put, update, and what delete. So we'll talk about those things. But in your front end, you most likely use two majorly, which is your what? Your get and your post. Get and post, you use those two a lot of times. So we'll talk about those two extensively, and then I'm going to give us projects that you can work on. That'll be after the whole session. But for now, I need you to understand this. First of all, you are fetching data from this what? API. Now, if the data is fetched, then that means this dot then is a what? It's a promise that waits for this data to be fetched. If data is fetched, get the response of the data and convert it into a JSON format so that you can read the data. If you go back to your this now, you should be able to see something. If I come right here now and I refresh, you should be able to see the now. Can you see it now? I see the API. Did I write this API? No. Now this is the API. Now you can read this data. You know that this particular place was address. This place is what company. You have email, you have ID. Then you have all of now. As you can see, it is readable. This is what JSON is. That is why you want to add to pass it or convert it into a what? Into a JSON response so that you can read it and understand how to implement it. Yeah, you won't have anything. Not that you won't have anything. So let me just show you. Let me remove this dot n for you so you see what I'm trying to say. So you've removed the dot n now. What exactly are you not going to have? Response. So as you can see now, see what you're having. You probably will not understand what this API is all about. So first of all, you need to get the response and convert this response to what? To JSON, so that it is readable for you. You understand? Because if you cannot use the if you cannot use the data, then there is no point. If you cannot read the data, then there's no point having the API. You cannot use it. So after converting it to JSON, what will you have? You will now have the data itself. You get it now? So now I can easily go and say what data dot what address, and I'm going to get all of the address. So let me show what I'm trying to say. Remember your objects now. If you want to get the this is an object. Can you see? Your what is showing here? Object. To get an object right here, what will you do? The data dot what? The object, the name of the object. So if you want to get the address here now, that will data dot what? Address. So I can come here and say what? Data dot what? Address. So if I go and check out, what will you have? Control app, you should have what? Address. So let us just wait for it. Now can you see? Now I have the address. Do you get? Now this particular address is also what? An object. I can also have what? Dot street. Let us try dot. Let's try dot city and let's see what we have. If you now say what? Dot city address dot what? City. Now if you check dot city, you're gonna have. You're not going to have what? The city that you have, which is what? Wembro, whatever the name is. Do you get it now? That is how you can get your APIs in JavaScript. Now, I'm going to stop the class here. Everybody there is ready. Everybody's looking at me like, so what is this? What did I got to myself into? But this is how APIs are being read in JavaScript. So go ahead and write this out, and we'll see you again in our next class.